tomorrow's another day. You might have had an awful time. You might have messed up. You might have made a huge mistake that you were an emotional wreck about. But tomorrow is another day. It doesn't have to happen again the next day. And you have to learn from what happened last time to make it better this time.
Welcome to I Share Hope, the podcast where world leaders share their real stories of hope and how you can use actionable hope to start changing your life today. And now, here's your host, Chris Williams.
All right, Steve Munby, if I get this right, you're the CEO of CfBT Education Trust, and that's
Can I just stop you there a sec?
Yeah.
Until the end of December, I am. On the 1st of January, I'm CEO of the Education Development Trust because we're changing our name.
Okay, great. Do you get to change any job duties or just the name?
Still the same organisation, still the same values, still the same passion, but a different name.
Okay, great.
From the 1st of January, I'm CEO of Education Development Trust.
And so if I get this right, y'all work with both regional and national levels of government, and you actually improving educational systems in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Africa, the UK, and other locations. I mean, that's an enormous footprint.
80 different countries we work in, yeah.
Wow. So explain that. Exactly what do y'all do and how in the world do you do it on such a broad scale?
Well, we basically work in Africa, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa. We work with aid agencies to help to rebuild broken education systems, especially in countries that have had war and famine. So we're working in places like Somalia, we're working in Rwanda, we're working in Kenya, and quite a few other countries in sub-Saharan Africa. In Kenya, we've got a program to get 81,000 elementary age girls to go to school.
Wow.
They're supposed to go, they're required to go, and they're not going. And our role is to get them to go and to learn when they're there. So that's just one program. We're also in countries like Libya, we're in Egypt, and other countries in North Africa. So in addition to that, we're in large parts of India, and Pakistan and Bangladesh. We're in Brunei, again helping to rebuild education systems and improve teaching in schools. In the Middle East, we're doing a lot of work across the Gulf with whole countries, and in the UK too.
Why is it that they in Africa, why is it they're supposed to go and you say they won't go? Is that the girls' choice, or is there some other local pressure that keeps them from that?
Well, there's a range of reasons why they don't go. First reason is there's often no running water in the school, which means there are no flushing toilets.
Yeah.
And it's just not at all where a girl wanted to be if they haven't got a flushing toilet. They've got a hole in the ground to queue up for, and no separate boys and girls toilets.
Oh, wow.
So that's a pretty horrible thing. And then on top of that, they want a hot meal.
Sure.
Some of them are going to walk 4 miles to get there. They want a hot meal when they're there. So unless there's flushing toilet and a hot meal, that's not an attractive proposition for them. On top of that, they have to have motivated teachers. And most of the teachers in the more rural areas don't want to be there. They're being placed there. So they're not engaged and motivated themselves.
Okay.
And then there's not enough resources, so that there's no textbooks or desks. So, and then on top of that, there's the cultural issue of the families who think that the girls shouldn't be going to school, either for religious reasons or because for economic reasons. And on top of that, in some of the tribal areas, where the warrior tribes exist, there's a process called beading, where a trainee warrior from 17 years old could choose a girl from the tribe and put beads around their neck. And they belong to that training warrior until they can get married at the age of 25. And that means they belong to them sexually. Wow. And these girls could be as young as 9, and then they're not supposed to go to school.
Wow.
So you can see the range of barriers we're working with, and we have some very brave colleagues who work for us, who are out there working with the communities to break down barriers, working with the teachers to motivate them, getting water put into the schools, and helping the communities to believe more in education.
Wow, that's an enormous project and does so much good. My goodness. So success rates there. I mean, do you see you're breaking through? Like, Just the barriers you mentioned in Africa, some of those barriers, I think that takes decades to start making a
Yeah,
dent.
I mean, we're not going to change everything, but we are getting more girls to go to school and they are learning more.
That's right.
So then get an education, grow up to be mothers, and are literate and can train and support their children and help them to be more educated and have more choices in there for their lives. That can transform a generation.
You're right. Love it. Absolutely awesome.
That's hope. That gives them hope.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let me ask you these questions. I can't wait to hear from the perspective you've got. So the first question is, what's your definition, favorite definition, or favorite quote, or your belief about hope?
Right. Well, I think hope is about, I think the leadership of hope is about the ability to help others to see how things can be better for them and for others. And I think that's a really important part of leadership. And one of my passions is leadership. And I think what a leader needs to have, crucially, probably the most important thing they need to have is optimistic leadership. And that's about how you elicit hope in others so they can see it's going to get better. There's a chance for it to get better. And one of my heroes is a guy called Sir Tim Brighouse, who's an educationist in England. And he says there are 4 things you need if you want to lead change in a challenging way, in challenging circumstances. The first thing he says you need is you have to regard crises as the norm and complexity as fun. The second thing he says you need is you have a bottomless well of intellectual curiosity. The third thing he says you need is a complete absence of paranoia and self-pity. And the fourth thing you need to have, and I think this is probably the most important, is unwarranted optimism.
Wow.
And I think that's a great quote about what excellent leadership looks like.
That's fantastic. You know, we've talked to a lot of people on this survey, and you are the first person who's really targeted the leadership involved with hope. I mean, a lot of people are leaders in their own right, for sure, but I've never heard somebody actually in this section tied into how a leader in particular should deliver hope. Fantastic. Thank you.
That's crucial. The ability to elicit hope in others and help them to believe it can get better is a key, crucial part of leadership. And for the leader himself or herself to have that sense of optimism and hope is crucial.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, question 2. Who's given you that kind of hope? Who's been that kind of leader in your life?
Well, I want to just mention one person in my life and one person I read about. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the person in my life, I remember I got my first senior job in a local education authority in the UK. It was a very senior job. It was a big step up for me. And it was well outside of my comfort zone. And I was, to be honest, I was struggling in that role. And I felt that I was letting my colleagues down. I wasn't on top of it. I was out of my depth. And I wasn't performing at the level I felt I ought to be performing. And I got so concerned about this, I went to see my boss, who was the director of education for this area. And I said to him, I'm going to resign because I'm letting you down and I'm letting my colleagues down and I can't accept that. At that moment, my boss had my future career in the palm of his hand. He could have said, I think you're right. I think you are letting us down and I think you should go. He didn't say that. He said, resignation not accepted. Because he believed in me. He knew I wasn't doing well, but he believed in me. He hoped, he was confident that I could get a lot better. And he put help in for me instead of dismissing me. And as a result, I ended up being great at that job. I ended up excelling in that job. But if he hadn't at that point in my life believed in me, against some of the evidence, believed in me and supported me, I would not have had a career in leadership and education. So he made that difference to me. And that was a great judgment on his part.
Wonderful example. Wow.
Sure. And I just want to mention someone else who I think is a great example of optimism and hope. And that is, you've probably heard this mentioned by the people, but that's Sir Ernest Shackleton, who led the expedition in Antarctica. And there was a point when they were shipwrecked and facing almost certain death. And that expedition, every single one of them survived. After 6 months of huge hardship, his leadership kept their morale high, kept them believing that they could survive, put the right strategies in place to help them to survive, and got them all home. That's a fantastic example of leadership and hope.
You are right. If anybody hasn't read that book about Ernest Shackleton, I'm trying to remember the title of that book. There's so many people who've mentioned him in other writings. What is the...
Yeah.
Anyway, look him up. Ernest Shackleton. Unbelievable story of survival and hope and leadership. That's a great point. I've read that book twice, and it's just so impactful.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Great examples. Thank you.
Okay.
2 wonderful people from your side of the world. I love that. All right. Number 3. When is a time in your life when you've had to really reach back and use the hope you're talking about? Not just leading others, but leading yourself.
When I went to be Director of Education in Merseyside in the UK, I had responsibility for 80 schools, and I was in charge. And when I went there, we had the second worst examination results in the country. And after a year of my leadership, we had the worst examination results in the country. And that was a bad time for me as a leader. I went live on the local Radio Merseyside, and the broadcaster said to me, "With respect," she said, "with respect, why don't you just give up? It's hopeless."
It's horrible.
And a national newspaper, a very well-known national newspaper, telephoned me and said they wanted to do a story about the worst local authority in the country. Would I do an interview?
Whoa.
And in the local newspaper, the Liverpool Echo, there was a letter in there calling for my resignation because I'd brought disgrace upon the borough of Knowsley.
Wow.
So for me, that was a time of despair, a time, you might call that the dark night of the soul as a leader. I had to ask myself some tough questions about whether I was up to this, or whether I should resign, or whether or not I was the right person, but I needed more time. And I came to the conclusion that I was doing the right things. I just needed more time. So I got all the head teachers together, all the school principals together in one room. And I remember this clearly. And I remember saying to them, in 3 years' time, people will be coming from all over the country to find out how we have been so successful. Now that proved to be the case. But what was needed at that time was for me to come out of my dark night of the soul and my time of despair, and to demonstrate optimistic leadership to those school leaders, to help them to believe that it was going to get better. And that was crucial. That was optimistic leadership. And that was a real moment for both the kind of dark side of failure, and then coming through that through optimistic leadership.
Wow. Excellent example. Wow. Such a public form of humiliation and maybe even bullying, if you want to put it in today's terms. That's insane. Wow. And you stuck it out. And when you had that meeting, I'm assuming some of the principals and teachers probably had a similar view of you and didn't like you. You were making changes they might not have wanted to make at that point, uncomfortable as change can be. Did they all just come along, or was it a hard battle there too?
No, I think they were already on the whole with me. Okay. Because they knew that things needed to get better, and they thought I might be able to help. So I think they were already with me. But I needed to show clear, optimistic leadership, a sense that it was going to get better, and a confidence that it was going to get better.
Yeah. Because
if I was confident about it, they can be confident about it. If you're not confident about it, how can you expect the people you are leading to be confident about it?
Right.
It was about demonstrating optimistic leadership, and they rose to it, and we had some great success.
Sure. Okay, so that brings up an obvious question. Did you believe it 100% yourself, or is there, as a leader, did you have to step out and say, I'm pretty sure we can do this, but I'm going to put a good face on it and go in with boldness.
Um, of course, I had an element of doubt,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew what was needed was not to demonstrate that element of doubt.
Yeah.
I knew what was needed was to communicate that clear sense of optimism, even if some of it was unwarranted, because that was what was needed.
Right.
And I think part of it is if you are really focused and determined and passionate about it, you help to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
And we ended up having a great deal of success. But I think that moment was the moment in my leadership.
Awesome. Awesome. Great work. Okay, question 4. This is a good interview. Thank you very much. I'm learning a ton. I'm glad I get to record these things because I don't have to take notes as fast as I want to here. I'm learning way more than I can consume. All right, so question 4. How are you sharing hope on a daily basis right now? So you've already told us about your organization. You can go in there a little deeper, but also throw in a little bit about your personal life. You're going across the street for a cup of coffee or going out to get the post, whatever it may be. How do you share hope?
Well, I know you want me to talk about my personal life, but I just want to say a little bit about how I'm sharing hope in my work life.
And I want that too. Give me both.
I have the privilege to work all over the world.
Good.
I believe that every child has the right to be a powerful learner wherever they are in the world. And I believe in the power and effectiveness of education to help to improve the lives of children and young people. And I was in Nairobi last year, and I went to visit a slum school. And this is in a desperate slum in the middle of in Nairobi city. It's full of corrugated iron shacks and rotting vegetables. It's really, really poor. And in the middle of this slum is this little space, and it's a school. And it's led by teachers who work for the organization I lead. And I watched a lesson for these young children in this tiny crowded space with hardly any light. And they were such enthusiastic learners because their parents had never been to school. And they knew that if they were going to have hope in their lives, education was going to help them to do something with their lives. And such enthusiasm and joy in their learning in that dark, narrow slum school was fantastic. And as I was being driven away, I came across another school, and it had the best name of a school I've ever heard. The name of the school was called Soon Big Brain Academy. And I thought that's a great definition of hope. Soon Big Brain Academy. You come to our school, you'll soon have a big brain. That's a lovely name for a school. So what I'm saying is that in the work that I do, I have the privilege with my colleagues of bringing hope to through education, not just in Africa, but in Asia and in other parts of the world too.
Wonderful. That's brilliant. Obviously, you're doing it every day at work. I couldn't imagine. I bet it's really fun and encouraging to be under your leadership professionally. You have so much hope and vision. You definitely give everybody something to follow and pursue. I think that's awesome and needed. I wish more people did that. All right. So what about you in your daily life? What are you going to do when you're walking across the street or just out and about in your own neighborhood? What do you do to share hope with a neighbor, a friend, or a colleague?
That's a hard one because I've not reflected upon that. I'm sorry. I'm going to struggle to answer that.
Oh, I tell you what, you'll end up answering it in question 5. So let's go with question 5. The simple ABC steps or 1, 2, 3s. How can I share hope or grow in hope as a person when we hang up this call?
Okay. Right. Well, I think one thing I've learned, and I really have learned this, is that feeling positive is a skill. Feeling positive is something that you learn how to do. And one thing I've learned in my life not just in my work life, but in my personal life, is that it's how you approach things that counts, not just the circumstances that you're in. And I think there's a great Maya Angelou quote which says something like, let me see if I can remember it. Great Maya Angelou quote which says, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them."
Mm-hmm.
And for me, in the most dark times I've had in my personal life and in my work life, I've had to really do some big talking to myself about why I'm letting what's happening to me affect me so much, and how I can change that perspective to come out of it with optimism and hope. Lots of examples of that in my personal life and in my work life. But what the point I'm making, I think, really is you have to learn that, you practice it. It doesn't just come instinctively. It's a skill to learn. You learn how to be resilient and optimistic by practice, by talking to yourself. And I certainly, in the most difficult situations I've been in, when I've been in situations where I've been tearful and emotionally drained, I've had to say, well, when that happens next time, how am I going to be different? And I think that's a skill. I think it's learnt. I think anyone who says I'm just not an optimistic person, that's not the point. I think everyone can be an optimistic person, but you have to learn how to have that approach.
That is helpful. That really is. And when you say learn how to have that approach, do you mean break that down for me a little bit? So I understand. Okay, I need to go from someone who's not naturally optimistic, or I'm very skeptical, or life has just been tough and I don't believe that it might be able to get better here or there. How do I start practicing that? Do I wake up every morning and repeat a certain mantra, or do I write some things down that I reference every time I start feeling a certain way that I can go back to truths that I know are real in my life? What would I do to practice that?
Well, I think all of those things would be good. For me, it's about looking at what I've been doing in the past and how I could do it differently in the future. What I've learned about how I behaved, how I handled, how I felt, and then imagining how I'd behave or feel if that happened again, and practicing that the next time. So I think it's about reflection, definitely about reflection. So when I've been in the most difficult situations and I've ended up being a wreck and I felt I've handled that really badly and I don't know what to do, the thing I've done most is reflect on how I could have handled that differently, not in a negative way, so how I'm going to handle it differently next time. And I think for me, and certainly in the work environment, the key message for me is tomorrow's another day. You might have had an awful time. You might have messed up. You might have made a huge mistake that you're an emotional wreck about. But tomorrow is another day. It doesn't have to happen again the next day. And you have to learn from what happened last time to make it better this time. And it's the learning bit that I think makes a big difference. And you can do that in different ways. You can use mantras. You can write things down. But for me, it's about reflecting on how I behaved and how I'm going to behave differently next time it happens to me. And I think that's a skill to be learned rather than an innate innate personality trait.
Wonderful. That's extremely helpful and practical. Thank you. So tell me this, how can I follow you or find you? Our listeners, I mean, there's so many people. We have people listening from over 40 countries, and you're already in most of those countries probably doing education work. How can these people follow what you're doing? Website, social media, wherever?
Okay, well, there's one website, which is our organization, which is Education Development Trust. Just Google Education Development Trust and you'll find us, and you can find out all about what we do and what I do and what I believe in and what I'm passionate about.
Great.
And you'll see blogs and all kinds of great stories about transforming the lives of children. But also you can follow me personally on Twitter at Steve_Munby.
Great.
And I'd be delighted if you wanted to follow me on Twitter.
Awesome. I'm sure you'll get many of those. So I'm going to spell that out. It's On Twitter, the handle is the @, so at Steve, STEVE _ Munby, MUNBY.
That's right.
Awesome. That's great. All right, so a couple of really random questions here. What do you want to do if you could write a book? And I'm sure have you written books already? How many books have you written already? Yes, how many?
I've only written one book, but I've written plenty of other stuff.
I bet you've got volumes of material out there. So if you could write a children's book for, the 8 to 10-year-old range, what would you write that book about?
I'd write a book about learning, making learning exciting. Every child is a learner.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some institutions and some families kind of crush that learning, and they don't. But every child is a learner, and every child is good at things. And just that we try to put them into a box which says they have to be good at this or that or the other, and not every child is good at this, that, or the other. So I'd write a book about finding what's great about what you're good at.
I love that.
And how you could be a learner.
I want to read that book when you write it. And then the next one, if you could be a student of anyone, who would it be?
Living or dead?
Oh, that's a great question. Give me one of each, if you have one of each. Oh, that's good. You cracked the door wide open there.
Right, okay. Well, I have some fantastic heroes in leadership. I am a student. I am a mentee of a guy called Sir Tim Brighouse, who's a UK educationalist, and is not only my mentor but a friend too. And if any of the people listening to this want to look him up, you'll see what a fantastic hero educator he's been. But also, I'm a fan of Martin Luther King and what he tried to do, and some of his passion for having a dream and turning into a reality. And he's a pretty good hero too of mine.
Wonderful.
I love the comment he made once that he said that if you want to have great leadership, you need both power and love in your leadership. And I've tried to emulate that power and love in my leadership.
I can see that. Awesome examples. Well, Steve Munby, you've been a privilege to talk to. Thank you very much for sharing your time. I really do appreciate this.
Great, thank you. Really good to talk to you.
Good talking to you too. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Steve Munby, a true champion of education, and what a great example of hopeful leadership. Wow, I've learned a lot. I really have. I've taken a lot of notes on that one, and I want to be a leader like that. I really do want to be a leader of hope. Obviously, doing this project with all of you is an example of me wanting to be more of a person of hope and share that in a community. And I think part of that for me is really stepping up and being that brave leader that I need to be in so many other areas of my life to really push hope forward. And I know that'll help me, not just the people around me. So anyway, Steve, thanks for the awesome example and great words of wisdom. You can find out more about this at isharehope.com. We'll have all the interview notes from Steve and links to his website, social media accounts, etc. So many projects that he's doing. It's truly amazing what he's doing. You really ought to check out their info. So you can hit that up over at isharehope.com or find me and social media channels all over the place. Chris Williams HQ. That's Chris Williams HQ. So I'd love to know what you're doing out there. If you've got an educator who's been a big influence in your life, or if you're educating people right now and you're really driving them forward in the way they're learning and growing and changing as people, that is a huge hope builder. It's very practical. No matter what subject you're teaching or no matter who your mentor is or who you're being a mentor to, just taking somebody the next step in life is a phenomenal way to build hope. Even if it's not under the label of hope, it's direction and it's a forward motion, and it gets people past hurdles that they might not be able to get past themselves, or that might have taken them decades longer if they just hadn't had a little bit of instruction. So tell me who's leading you, who's educating you, and who you're educating. I'd love to see some examples of that. That would help us pursue what we're doing here from an iShare Hope standpoint, researching how hope is really being delivered. Thanks. Look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.
You've just listened to I Share Hope. If you're ready to make a change, head to our website at isharehope.com and claim your free copy of the Top 10 Actions of Hope from World Leaders to use hope in your own life. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.